Classes started again officially at Marist 2 days ago, but for me they started yesterday. I've got Tuesday, Friday classes. I'm there on campus just those days out of the week, and it was very nice returning. This is my third year teaching at Marist, and I was going to shoot a video yesterday specifically about this, but got tied up with too many things, so I'm shooting one about it today. Made me think of quite a few things. One of the best sets of experiences that I had, and this is sort of a sign of how long I've been there now, there's kind of a longevity involved in this, is that I ran into 5 former students, all of whom I enjoyed having in my classes, whose papers were quite often at least better than average to sometimes spectacular. And 2 of them were in my ethics class that I taught in the afternoon. They were students who I'd formerly had in one or another of my Intro to Philosophy classes. One was a guy who I had my very first semester at Marist, when I taught in the very basement, the bowels of Donnelly Hall, in this one classroom that's not particularly well set up. And it was very nice to have him in the class. He had actually petitioned me over and over again to try to get an override, and there's a policy in place that keeps students from getting those too easily because they want to keep class sizes fairly small. And I told the guy, you know, just keep trying, and sure enough he got in. When I asked him what he actually had to do for the override, he said, I can't tell you. But I'm very happy to have him in the class. I've got another student who was in my Intro to Philosophy class last semester, who very, very bright, writes excellent papers, inquisitive mind, talks a lot in class. I'm very happy to have her as well. They're going to be sort of leaven for the bread of that ethics class. And then I saw one of my students from my ethics class last semester when I was at the library. I had to get my computer set up so that I can actually use it on Marist campus. They have to put all sorts of software on it. They're very security conscious there. And so there was, you know, they relocated the IT people who do that to the library so that they could handle all the freshman influx. And I saw this former student of mine who wrote extraordinarily good papers, talked a lot in class, in the ethics class. Usually was quite on point, and who I very much enjoyed catching up with. And she was there with a friend of hers, and we talked a little bit about majors and what they're studying now. I ran into another student going out of the library, a student who I'd had in two semesters before in ethics class, and caught up with her a little bit in passing. And then as I was coming through one of the buildings, you know, on my way to my car, I ran into yet another student, a guy who I spent a lot of time with talking after class, in part because we have, you know, the military connection in common. I'm a vet, and he's in ROTC, but he's also prior service, which, you know, in my view actually makes for the best officers. I would much rather have somebody over me who's actually been an enlisted man himself, rather than just proceeded up through the ranks into the gentleman officer corps that we have. And anyway, he and I have, you know, talked quite a bit about all sorts of issues, ranging from ethics to military life to, you know, what went on in high school, all sorts of interesting things. And so I had some time on my hands, and I said, well, let's go and get something cool to drink and sit down for a while and catch up. So we did that, and that was really nice. I always enjoy reconnecting with these students long after the classes are finished, in part because I get to see what they actually remembered or were struck by or found application for from the classes, but also because I often form, you know, kind of, I wouldn't say deep friendships necessarily with all my students, but I form some sort of personal bond, in part because I ask them to do so much personal writing over the course of the semester. I get to know them quite well, and I give them feedback, you know, on the papers that they write in the course of my classes that I know sometimes they respond to. You know, I talk with them after class. Yeah, there's something really nice about that. So that was a quite enjoyable aspect of my day yesterday. I had 2 classes. In the morning I had my Intro to Philosophy class, which is now called Philosophical Perspectives, but for all practical purposes that means the same thing as Intro to Philosophy. And this semester I have centered it on the theme of love, friendship, and desire. So we're reading mostly ancient and medieval texts, a few modern texts that not only introduce them to the history of philosophy in general and you know, big themes in metaphysics or epistemology or ethics or philosophy of human nature, but to these you know, analyses and descriptions and problems dealing with these intensely personal aspects of human existence. When I went through and I started thinking about the reading list that I wanted to do, you know, there's always this temptation to try to cram in way too much, which is a beginner's mistake in designing classes. And in these survey classes taught to non-majors, you really can't overwhelm them with too much material, or else none of it is going to make any sense to them. So what I did is I focused mainly on these ancient and medieval thinkers, and I had to leave out a lot of people who I originally wanted to talk about, like, you know, Bernard of Clairvaux. You know, he's got a lot of interesting things to say about love, but we just couldn't fit him in. So if we want to do Thomas Aquinas, we can't do Bernard this time. If we want to do Cicero, we can't do Seneca this time. If we want to do Plato's Symposium, well, we can't do the Phaedrus. You know, you have to make little cuts. So next semester, I'm going to teach the same class to, of course, different students. But we're also going to focus it on this same grand theme of love, friendship, and desire, and explore different, you know, philosophical approaches to them. And we'll hit some of the ancient thinkers who we didn't get to, and medieval thinkers, but we'll focus it more on modern thinkers. So in any case, I you know, did my typical run through, which is welcome everybody in, take roll, and then spend a lot of time going over the syllabus and, you know, the particular, you know, details of certain things, like what constitutes a full page of writing, you know, stuff that's not that interesting. And then I show them the iLearn site. iLearn is our course management system. You know, if you're at a different university, you might have Blackboard or Moodle or something like that. iLearn is a variant of Sakai. And I create entire online learning environments using the course management system, which was part of why it was so easy for me to switch to online teaching, you know, outside of the normal semester in the summer and in the winter for Marist, because I already had all these great things put into iLearn for my ethics classes. So for an intro class, every semester I redesign things. There's some things I retain, you know, descriptions of what philosophy is, or the breakdowns in philosophy, but every semester when I'm doing new material, you may have seen some of the lecture videos from the Intro to Philosophy classes. I have that, but I also supply them with handouts and entire lessons, you know, covering the basic ideas. All of that is loaded into the course management system. All the assignments are carried out in there, and I do actually have a lot of assignments in my classes. I tend to, every week there's something that they have to write, and it's usually at least a page and a half. Then there's some larger papers over the course of the semester as well. And, you know, I need them to be thinking about this stuff, and if they're not writing about it, they're not going to do the sort of deep thinking that I want them to do. So, you know, we cover all those sorts of things, and I show them, here's where you find this, and here's where you get the course text. I don't actually use a textbook. The iLearn site itself is the textbook, and I've got links to PDF files in which I've got Plato's Symposium or Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, book 8 and 9. Everything is provided to them essentially for free, which, you know, is perfectly fine. They pay a ton of money to go to this place, so why should I burden them like a lot of their other classes are doing with $100 in textbooks or even more, when I can, you know, I can do this with some effort on my part, and give it to them for free, and give them something that they won't sell back, something that they'll actually hold on to and keep on their tablet or their computer. So, you know, the intro class was pretty good. It's very big. There's 30 students registered for the class, because the freshman class turned out to be a little bit larger than they'd expected at Marist, about 100 extra students, so they had to find places for them. And fortunately, not everybody showed up. I think about 28 students showed up, which is good because we only had 29 seats in the room. So we'll see what happens with that. Usually there's a few people who drop. But it sounds like a pretty good crop of students. Usually Marist students are they're a little bit passive as freshmen, in part because many of them have gone to middle schools and high schools where they're not encouraged to ask a lot of questions. There's a lot of teaching to the test and just shut up so we can get through this kind of thing. Plus a lot of them are from fairly traditional homes where it's nice to know education is held in some respect, but the idea is, the teacher's there to teach, so shut up and listen. And we want to try to break them of that a bit in philosophy. It's tough to do in a class with 30 students, right? Because not everybody can talk at the same time, and not everybody's as comfortable with it. And it is difficult material, and students are often quite intimidated. A lot of them get a chance to talk in part through the papers that I have them write, because I have them think about the basic ideas and then apply them within the scope of their own life and experiences, and do some reflection, as well as doing close readings of things. So, on the whole, good crop of students to work with. Generally, Marist students, when I give them work to do, they will do it. They may not always understand exactly what I'm asking for the first time around, but they have a good work ethic, and that makes all the difference in the world when you're teaching this sort of material. So that was the morning class. And then, first day coming back, it's always reconnect with colleagues, and that's exactly what I did. I went down the hall, one hall in our building, and then went, up to the next floor where my adjunct office is, and came down the hall and chatted with people and found out what they'd done over the summer and what they were up to now, and conveyed greetings and received greetings, and all that sort of thing. And that was nice. Check to see whether I'm going to still be doing a talk later this fall for the Medieval and Renaissance Studies speaker series, and the answer appears to be yes at this point, so that's good. I'll have a video about that when I actually do the talk. And then, saw another colleague in the adjunct office, a writing colleague. Talked with him for a while, about the writing program and what they're going through and what the crop of freshmen look like. We always it's not quite gossip, it's more talking shop that we instructors do across the curriculum with each other. That's part of what goes on at a university. That's part of what makes it into a community of inquiry. A university isn't just a bunch of people showing up, teaching their classes, and then getting the hell out of there. It's people who, come to a place where learning is supposed to occur, and they're actually interested in whether it is occurring. How do you determine whether it's occurring? How do you make sure that it's actually going to happen? How do you connect it up with what your other colleagues are doing? And sometimes we get into arguments with each other, or disagree about whether they should read this text or not. But for the most part, it's pretty genial there. Or at least it is for me. And then I had my afternoon class, which was the ethics class, early in the afternoon. And that was, in the same building where I've taught for quite a while, same building where my office is. And there were about 25 students who showed up for that. I think I have 27 on the books. We went over the same sort of stuff as we do for the intro class. Here's the syllabus, what are your papers going to be like, what can you expect, what's my grading policies, what if you have a late assignment, all that sort of stuff. And I was able to get them to be, engaged when we were talking about, like the course goals and why we're doing this, why writing matters, for example, and, why they need to take the class, what they're hopefully going to get out of it. Do the same thing with showing them the online learning environment. For ethics, I'm really recycling what I've done over the last couple years, the last 7 or 8 terms since I teach it so often. I go over the same material. I change it up a little bit, like this semester, for example. Nietzsche is not going to be a required reading, which usually I would couple with Plato's Republic Book 1, so we talk about the might makes right theory. I'll still have it in there as a supplemental reading if they want it. But we are going to add Plato's Republic Book 9, where because I realized when we do the Plato, book 4, they do get, the 4 cardinal virtues, but they don't have enough to make sense of it. We need another class day where we talk about the appetites and pleasures and states of character and that sort of thing. So book 9 is a good book. 9 is the book about how people screw up, and book 9 is a good book for that. So I added some things, I subtracted some things, but for the most part it's fairly similar to what we had before. We're not doing Hobbes at all. I've got another MacIntyre reading in place of some of the Thomas Aquinas. But in any case, I got things set up well. They know what their first reading is. It's MacIntyre's Plain Persons and Moral Philosophy, which is a text that I particularly like to start things off with, because he situates the very abstract moral theory stuff in these ancient and medieval and modern texts in the context of ordinary people's lives. He says everybody has to do moral philosophy to some degree. You're either going to do it badly or you're going to do it well. You're either going to do it unconsciously or you're going to do it consciously. So let's actually think about what we're doing. Let's think about these big questions and how you focus in on how they fit into your individual life and how you see everybody else around you doing the same. So, I gave them a little bit of a rundown about that. I had some interesting questions. Some people asked about, how hard are these texts going to be? Is this going to connect up with other classes that I've had? They usually have a pretty varied experience. The ethics class is the second philosophy class that they take at Marist, but it's usually quite a bit after they took their Intro to Philosophy class. And Intro to Philosophy, there is a core to it, but it can be taught in a lot of different ways, so I can't count on them having necessarily had exposure to Aristotle or Kant or Thomas Aquinas, and I certainly can't count on them actually having remembered what was taught in those classes, because it could be several semesters since they've been in there. So we have to sort of begin from the ground up, and it's one of these classes that everybody has to take regardless of their major. Usually I don't have a single philosophy major in my ethics class. I'm teaching to communications and business and fashion merchandising and sociology and special ed. Who knows what majors they're going to be, and it's up to me as the instructor to find ways to make this material relate to what they're doing. Oh, criminal justice is another big major too. So I try to come up with lots of good examples that they can all understand, and maybe it doesn't apply directly to their major, but they can at least appreciate how it would fit into something that they do think about. So all told, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good semester. I've got quite a few projects outside of class lined up for myself, but I'll talk more about that, I think, in my next monthly update that I do on my channel regularly now. And I just wanted to, I was so happy about my day yesterday and how it went going back to Marist. Again, it's my 3rd year, so this is my 2nd time coming back. I just wanted to share that with my viewers. This may interest some of you, this may not interest some of you. I know that some of you are people who like watching the videos because you couldn't afford to go to college. Or it just didn't work out, the way your work life went or personal life went, and you watch these kinds of videos, mine and other people's, in part to try to have something like a university education. I know that some of you watching this are students either at Marist or at other colleges. I know that some of you might be friends of mine from way back or something like that. So I wanted to share something, at least for me, kind of personal, but also that might give you, peel back the veil a little bit and show you what it's like for a college professor coming back to teach at their institution. Now, it's not completely my institution because I'm an adjunct, so I don't have the same kind of stake that a full-time faculty member would have, but I have come to feel kind of a sense of belonging, being part of a community. Certainly with my colleagues, certainly with my students, and with quite a few of the the staff that I deal with as well in IT in the library. There's a real sense of community there, and that's something that as a scholar, as a instructor, as an academic, I have to say I'm finding more and more congenial, something more and more even necessary in my own life. Nobody wants to be an island off entirely on their own, or at least some people do, but you know, that's not really a full life. For an academic, a full life, I think, includes, at the very least, having some people that you can talk with, not necessarily teach, but at least just talk with and bounce ideas off of, who actually care about what you're talking about and find some intrinsic value in it. Maybe not in all of it, but at least they're open to the possibility that what you're doing actually has some value. It's a lot easier to sustain one's own endeavors when there's a reflection going on, when there's a recognition, a mutual recognition on both sides. So this is starting to get a little rambling. I'm going to cut it off here because I think that's quite enough for this video.